Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. New day, new go show. This one's on omens. Lately, we've been talking a lot through these letters about self and environment. I've been elaborating on that theme. On omens is a little bit longer. I think it's going to take a couple of videos to get through this go show. There's a lot of meat in this one. And although his reference, now this is another letter to Shijo Kingo. And as I've said before, this Shijo Kingo was a lay monk who was not only a leading samurai for Lord Chiba, but near the Kamakura area. But he was responsible for a great number of retainers and help and so forth. So he was in a natural position to teach. And although he faced a lot of danger for being such a strong Nichiren supporter, he was also a great source of information for everyone who was like, you know, for instance, why do you, Shijo Kingo, follow Nichiren in the face of all this opposition? And so Nichiren really equipped Shijo Kingo with a lot of doctrinal teachings, scholarship, and did a lot of question and answer kind of letters to help Shijo Kingo be a good teacher, an extension of Nichiren, if you will. So this is another of those letters, and so this is why I'm preparing you, that there's some core concepts in here. But I want you to understand that even though Nichiren uses the scholarship of, for instance, the Buddha's teachings always preceded by omens. So this word omens is a very Western word. What might be easier to understand omens is that the universe around us, the world around us, the neighborhood around us, the people around us, all react to our energy, our the force of conviction that we put out around us, our aura. Not just what we say, but the intention behind what we say, the attitude behind what we say, the bodhisattva affect of our environs as we ourselves do things, make causes, right? And this applies not only to ourselves, but again, by expression. It affects our siblings, our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, so on and so forth. And when a teaching, the more profound a teaching is, the more commitment, the more strength of intent, the more influence that teaching, that attitude, that intent has, the more it reverberates in our environments. Right? And as human beings, that's the only time we, with our human perception, generally catch the effects of our karma being rattled, for instance, right? Our momentum is being shifted. Without deep wisdom, without Myoho Renge Kyo, which enables us to see that within our own lives, our human lives generally only perceive those kind of things as a tertiary thing from the response that we are experiencing in our environments. And then we ask ourselves, why are people acting that way? Or why is this different? Oh, it must be something I'm doing. And even that requires quite a bit of insight, doesn't it? So what Nichiren is using is a much grander example. And he's saying whenever we're about to break into a profound teaching like the Buddha's teachings, it's always preceded by omens or events or the conditions of our environs, right? And that is, we all experience that as we practice, and we call it obstacles that we face personally when we fervently seek to fuse our human existence with our Buddha existence, our Buddha wisdom. Sometimes nasty things come up in our lives. Sometimes we don't know which way to duck, we might say. But you have to know that when that's happening is because you're rattling the boat. You're shaking things up. And you're taking your normal momentum that's going in a non-productive way, a negative way perhaps, and you're shaking it loose from that, and you're fighting the gravity of your kinetic energy, and you're redirecting it toward joy and happiness and Buddhahood. And sometimes it's like when ships re-enter the Earth's atmosphere from space. They have great tiles and shields and all sorts of things because they start to vibrate and heat up, and this is how meteorites don't make it to Earth, right? We see them as stars, not stars, but like shooting stars, we call them. It's just meteorites coming through our atmosphere and getting so bombarded with energy that they flame out, they burn up and extinguish themselves as they come into our atmosphere, right? It's the same way with our karma. We're sailing along in our karma, just falling through life, but then we start to chant Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, and we are rattling that momentum, at least the parts of it that are non-productive, non-life affirming, the negatives, the attachments, the sufferings that we feel are not gliding along. And Namo Myoho Renge Kyo is trying to change our influence, our momentum into more life affirming, positive ways. And that's like sometimes very difficult, and it causes heat, friction, right? So this is when Nichiren says the Buddha's teachings are always preceded by omens, that's what he's saying. He's saying anytime you make a positive cause, action in your life, or in the life of everyone, because when you do so, you affect your environment, and to the degree that you affect your environment and influence your environs, the more you encounter resistance. And sometimes that's not pleasant. Follow? So, with all of that in mind, let's get into it. It starts out, strange occurrences in the heavens astound all people, and calamities on earth disturb everyone. When the Buddha was about to preach the Lotus Sutra, he caused the 5 omens and the 6 omens to appear. Of these, the omen of the earth shaking indicates that the earth quaked and trembled in 6 different ways. So he's talking about earthquakes, right? The meaning of the 6 ways is explained in the 3rd volume of the great teacher Tendai's Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra. Quote, one of the 6 is that the east rises and the west falls. The eastern quarter corresponds to the color blue and governs the liver, and the liver governs the eyes. The western quarter corresponds to the color white and governs the lungs, and the lungs govern the nose. Hence, the east rising and the west falling indicates that the benefits of the sense of sight appear, and in response, the earthly desires of the sense of smell disappear. Similarly, when the benefits of the sense of smell appear, in response, the earthly desires of the sense of sight disappears. In like manner, the rise and fall of the other directions signifies the appearance of benefit and the disappearance of earthly desires with respect to the other sensory organs. So that's interesting. It sounds a little bit mystical, but it was a Chinese way of communicating the deep connection between body and mind that was a part of Chinese history for thousands of years, right? Medicine, Qigong, all of it. And it's interesting when we consider that in our current day, we're struggling with COVID-19. One of the most common symptoms given of people who've been infected is that they couldn't taste or smell food for weeks on end. So that would indicate what from this? that the liver has been affected, right? So it follows. It makes sense. Okay. Concerning this, the great teacher Miao Lo said, quote, "One of the six sense organs represent the points of the compass." One's six sense organs represent the points of the compass. It has already been established that the sense of sight and that of smell represent east and west. It follows then that the sense of hearing and that of taste corresponds to north and south. Center corresponds to the mind, and the four directions to the body. The body is endowed with the four sense organs, and the mind is generally related to all four. Hence, the mind induces rise or fall with respect to the sensory functions of the body. So it's a very important concept to reinforce the idea that mind governs every aspect of the body, and that every aspect of the body in turn influences the mind. They're separate but one, itai doshin. This applies to the individual as well as the family, the extended community, so on. The 10 directions are the environment, and the living beings are life. To illustrate, environment is like the shadow, and life the body. So there we are again, understanding that when we practice, we practice not solipsistically. That's an illusion. The idea that we practice alone is an illusion. That we live alone is an illusion. We cannot be without our environment. No environment, no life. No life, no environment. They're really two sides of the same coin. Without the body, no shadow can exist, and without life, no environment. That's what I just said. In the same way, life is shaped by its environment. The eyes are formed by the eastern quarter. From this we know that the tongue is formed by the southern quarter, the nose the western, the ears the northern, the body all four quarters, and the mind the center. Therefore, when the people's 5 sense organs break down, the 4 quarters and the center will be startled and shaken, and the center will be, and as signs of the consequent destruction of the land, mountains will collapse, grasses and trees will wither, and rivers will run dry. When the people's eyes, ears, and other sense organs are startled and disturbed, changes will occur in the heavens, and when their minds are agitated, the earth will quake. What sutra was ever preached without the earth trembling in the 6 different ways? This occurred each time the Buddha expounded the sutra. However, when the Buddha was about to expound the Lotus Sutra and the earth quaked in 6 different ways, the people were particularly astonished. Bodhisattvas Maitreya asked a question about this phenomena, and Bodhisattva Manjushri answered. All of this occurred because the omen was greater in both magnitude and duration than when the other sutras were preached, and thus the question, too, was much more difficult to resolve. That is why Miao Lo said, quote, "Was any Mahayana sutra ever preached without multitudes of people gathering, without the Buddha emitting a ray of light from between his eyebrows, without flowers raining down from heaven, or without the earth quaking? However, none of them ever produced such great doubt." This comment means that although there were omens for all the other sutras as well, none was ever as great as those that occurred when the Lotus Sutra was expounded. For that reason, the great teacher Tendai said, quote, "People say that when a spider weaves its web, it means that some happy event is near, and that if a magpie chatters, it foretells the coming of a guest. Even minor things are presaged by some sign. How then could great affairs be without omens? By means of the near, the distant is revealed. Thus, When he expounded the theoretical teachings of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha manifested great portents never seen during his more than 40 years of preaching. The omens that heralded the essential teaching, however, were far greater than the omens that preceded the theoretical teaching, and even more so than those that had surpassed the omens that preceded the sutras expounded before the Lotus Sutra. The great quakes that occurred when an enormous treasure tower sprang up from the earth and bodhisattvas as numerous as dust particles of the 1,000 worlds emerged from beneath the earth seemed like gales blowing over the ocean, creating great waves the size of mountains that tossed small boats about like reed leaves, engulfing even their sails. Therefore, while Maitreya had inquired of Manjushri about the omens that appeared in the introduction chapter, with regard to the great omens that occurred in the emerging from the earth chapter, he questioned the Buddha himself. So, this is, as you understand, these are skillful means, right? These are stories to illustrate mental conditions, the sense of the mind of ordinary people and those students of Buddhism, the way that we experience our life changes in accord with the changes in our kinetic energy, the changes in our momentum. When we learn something of great insight, an aha moment, our entire body feels. You ever have profound tingles all over your body when you realize something? It's that simple, right? Our body reacts to our mind's insights. And our mind's challenges, right? When something produces great fear in you, doesn't our body shake, quake? Miao explained this, saying, quote, "The theoretical teaching concerns matters that are shallow and comparatively recent, and Manjushri could be relied on to the answer. But because the Buddha's original enlightenment in the remote past is hard to comprehend, in other words, the pre-existing condition of Buddhahood, very hard to comprehend, only the Buddha could be depended on for an explanation." What does that mean? It means take it to Gohonzon. When you have very difficult obstacles in your life, when you know that there are things that must change within your life that are deeper than you're able to fathom in your human mind, then you must not rely on your human mind. You must take those conditions, no matter how abstract they might be, because you don't understand them yet. With understanding comes clarity. With clarity comes Buddha nature, right? Relief from those sufferings and obstacles. So that when you need that kind of change in your life, and who of us doesn't, this is when you need to apply yourself. Use this mandala of Gohonzon and chant fervently until you feel the joy, until you feel the relief. That's what that sentence means. Only the Buddha could be depended on for an explanation. Not Shakyamuni, the Buddha, your Buddhahood. Although the Buddha did not explain matters concerning the theoretical teachings, Manjushri generally understood. But he was unable to even begin to fathom matters connected with the essential teaching, and these great omens concerned events occurring in the Buddha's lifetime. So all these stories are from the standpoint of indicating Shakyamuni Buddha, but Shakyamuni Buddha's whole life, all of his teachings was stop, and this is the lifespan chapter. This is exactly what they're referring to here, and that Nichiren's referring to, as well as these other teachers, that it is your Buddha nature not Shakyamuni. He's the founder. Yes, he was the first to manifest this nature, but that nature is within all of us. It's been around since long before Shakyamuni walked the earth. That's the lifespan chapter. This is why Nichiren created this mandala. That's the whole ball of wax right there. He continues, when the Buddha came to preach the supernatural powers chapter, he displayed 10 supernatural powers. They were supernatural powers incomparably more wondrous than either the Omens or the introduction chapter or those of the treasure tower and emerging from the earth chapters. The ray of light that the Buddha emitted from between his eyebrows in the introduction chapter illuminated 18,000 worlds in the eastern direction, but the great rays of light that he emitted from all his pores in the supernatural powers chapter illuminated all the worlds in the 10 directions. So here he is, he's taking apart these teachings, these skillful means, to try to make them more understandable to the people of his day. Just as you and I are doing now to those we talk to about Buddhism, right? While the quaking of the earth in the introduction chapter was limited to the lands of a major world system, in the supernatural powers chapter, the lands of the Buddhas of the 10 directions quaked severely, and all the lands trembled in 6 different ways. The omens that have appeared in our time are exactly like this. So this is making the teachings of Shakyamuni much more relevant to the people of the 13th century Japan, and you and I as well. The great omens of the supernatural powers chapter foretold the essence of the Lotus Sutra would spread widely after the Buddha's demise, when the 2,000 years of the former and middle days of the law had passed and the latter day of the law had begun. The sutra states, quote, because after the Buddha has passed into extinction, there will be those who can uphold the sutra, and the Buddhas are all delighted in manifest immeasurable supernatural powers. It also speaks of the evil filled with anger, greed, and stupidity, age of the latter day of the law. And that's what we're dealing with today, right? Where are we time-wise? Okay. So here we go now with question and answers. Question. Now all omens, whether good or bad, foretell something that will occur in an hour or two, a day or two, a year or two, or in 7 or 12 years at the most. How could there be omens that foretell what will take place more than 2,000 years later? Answer. The event presaged by omens that appeared during the reign of King Chao of the Chao dynasty became a reality only after 1,015 years. King Kriki's dream came true only after 22,000 years. How then can you doubt the appearance of omens 2,000 and more years before the event? Again, this refers to teachings, right? Nobody tracked somebody's cause and effect relationship for 20,000 years, right? But it's told, it's lore, it's cultural dogma that is used to explain the cause and effect relationship that we have with our environment. And so he's referring to them here. Question. Why were the omens presaging the time after the Buddha's passing greater than those that concerned his lifetime? Answer. The earth moves in response to how the people's 6 sense organs are affected. Depending on the extent of his influence, the 6 different ways in which the earth moves will vary in intensity. The sutras preached prior to the Lotus Sutra seem to extinguish people's earthly desires associated with their 6 sense organs. But in reality, they do not. In contrast, the Lotus Sutra conquers the fundamental darkness from which all earthly desires originate, samsara. Hence, the earth shakes severely. Moreover, there are many more evil, greedy, arrogant, angry, bad influence, and negative people in this latter age than during the Buddha's lifetime. It was for these reasons that the Buddha taught and showed that the omens that would appear in the latter day of the law would be still greater than those of his own time. This is also, again, this theme that keeps recurring lately, an example of Itaidoshin. Why are there more greed, anger, foolishness people in this latter age than were extant 3,000 years ago? Well, first of all, population growth, right? But secondly, that's a cause and effect relationship. How many people made causes against enlightenment, against Buddha nature, against Myoho Renge Kyo? And their ancestry, right, carries this karma along, manifests it, multiplies it, right? So there's more and more of it in the world, right? Those who seek their own enlightenment, their own Buddha nature, is a small fraction of the total population of the planet. It's growing. That's because, as Buddha predicted, his teachings are spreading, not always spreading correctly, so there's still that negative energy multiplying itself, right? How many people do you know that join groups and organizations that at first seemed really, I mean, we love societal relationships, we love memberships, right? But after some time of practice, we start to pick it apart and see the erroneous or the things in it that don't seem to work, and it drives us away. And that's very, very negative when it concerns Buddhism, certainly. When your Buddhist practice drives you away from Buddhist practice, then you're not practicing correctly. You're being influenced incorrectly. And that's either coming from the group, the organization, or yourself. But it's coming from somewhere. Something has to change. This is when you should rededicate yourself to chanting to a Nichiren Gohanzen, not somebody else's mandala, somebody else's mandala with their own signatures and their own claim to authority. That's not a clean Nichiren inscribed mandala, right? Question: what proof can you offer? Answer: the Lotus Sutra states, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after its passing? So he's reminding of these same passages all the time. It's like people just forget, right? Setting aside the 7 reigns of the heavenly deities and the 5 reigns of the earthly deities and more than 2,000 years of the 90 reigns of human rulers, the great earthquake of the Shoka era, and the extraordinary phenomena that appeared in the heavens during the Bun-ei era, were prodigies unprecedented in Japan. If the people are filled with joy, auspicious omens will appear in the heavens, and the deity Chakra will shake the earth. If evil thrives in people's minds, ominous changes will take place in the heavens, and terrible calamities will occur on the earth. The magnitude of the changes in the heavens varies in accordance with the degree of the people's anger. The same is true of the disasters on the earth. Japan today is filled with people from the ruler on down to the general populace with minds of great avarice, anger, and stupidity. The source of this evil has arisen in connection with me. There is a sutra entitled the Protection Sutra, one that came after the Lotus. It relates how King Ajatashatru went to the Buddha and asked, quote, every year my country has been beset by great droughts, violent gales, floods, famine, and pestilence. Moreover, we have been attacked by another nation. Why should all these disasters occur when this is the very country in which the Buddha made his advent? The Buddha replied, splendid, splendid. It is admirable of you, O great king, to have asked this question. But you have committed many wrongs and evils. Among them, you killed your own father, and taking Devadatta as your teacher, you did me injury. Because these 2 offenses are so serious, your country is beset by innumerable disasters. The sutra goes on to quote the Buddha as saying, quote, "After my death, in the latter day of the law, when monks like Devadatta fill the land, a single monk will appear to embrace the correct teaching. Those evil monks will exile and put to death this man of the correct teaching. They will violate not only the king's consort, but also the daughters of the common people, thereby filling the country with the seeds of slanders. For this reason, the nation will suffer various calamities and will later be invaded by another country." So, Nichiren wasn't the first to say this, was he? These were the words of Shakyamuni Buddha. I refer you back to the statements he made, and I was talking about Itai Doshin, the nature of the influence and its mirroring in the environment, others, the world about you. The priests of the Nembutsu today are exactly like the evil monks mentioned in the above sutra. Moreover, the great conceit of the true word school's teachers exceed that of Devadatta 100,000, 10,000 million times. I will briefly describe the strangeness of the true word school. So, his favorite foe, right? Its priests, or its head monks, its abbots, paint a picture of the 9 honored ones seated on an 8-petaled lotus in the center of the womb realm. Then they climb onto this picture and, stepping on the faces of the Buddhas, conduct their ceremony of anointment. Well, we've heard of that ceremony before, right? It is as if they were trampling on the faces of their own parents or treading on their emperor's head. Such monks, such abbots, such leaders as these fill the entire country and have become the teachers of both high and low. No wonder the nation faces ruin. Ruin. This is the most important teaching. I will explain it again on another occasion. I have written to you a little about it before, but do not speak of it indiscriminately to others. You have sent me expressions of your sincerity not just once or twice, but whenever an opportunity presented itself. I can find no words to express my appreciation. Yes, for sure, as Nichiren admits, this is a very important and essential concept, taking us all the way back to the Noble Eightfold Path of life, right? How to behave, how to live fully, positively, life-affirmingly, because the way we live is reflected in our world, in our environments, in our families, communities, country, so on. This is the crux of Buddhist practice as a human, is an ultimate responsibility for the quality of our lives and those around us, because our lives are not singular. Our lives may appear to be our own, but our lives are experienced through the lives of the planet. Other people, certainly. Our families, certainly. But even the planet, the country, the community, the neighborhood, the home. You could think of the word home in this more encompassing way than an I, a self, a me, an ego. When we realize in Buddhism that all those terms of individuation, they're just part of home. Home being the self, the home, the house, the land, the neighbors, all of it, the universe. There is no separation in Buddhism. We understand that all of it is the same thing. This is why our Buddha nature is inherent, because it is everything. Okay, so on Omens, one that may require several readings. Next, letter to the abbots of Sejoji. Thank you with great gratitude for your participation. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Download podcasts of these videos wherever you get your podcasts. Stay healthy. Keep your practice strong. Ask me questions in the comments. That's why it's there and open to you. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.